James Mattis marching for the exit sooner than expected. The president forcing him out earlier than the general had planned, not waiting for Mattis to leave at the end of February. Mattis resigning over the president's decision to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. The White House saying it was time for Mattis to go.
I think the president had known for quite some time now that Secretary Mattis and he did not share some of the same philosophies about, they didn't have the same worldview. You heard the president say a couple weeks ago, I think, on an interview that he recognized that Mr. Mattis, he called him a Democrat, recognized that he had, I think Mattis had to leave the service of the Obama administration over similar types of disagreements. So, no, I don't think it was a surprise.
Lucas Tomlinson is live at the Pentagon with more on this. The president's relationship with General Mattis showed some signs of strain over the past few months. What's the view from the Pentagon?
That's right, Rick. Defense Secretary Mattis said that the president's decision to ultimately pull out of Syria was the final straw, but there were other reasons Mattis quit. The president's decision in a tweet before the Army-Navy game appointing the Army Chief of Staff General Mark Milley to become the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs was at odds with Mattis, because Mattis's choice was the Air Force's top officer. On Fox News Sunday, the president's acting chief of staff admitted to tensions.
Let's be honest with each other. I think the relationship between these two men had been fraying. I think the president no longer relied on Mattis to be able to deliver the president's vision.
In his resignation letter Thursday, Mattis admitted to tensions with the president, saying they did not see eye to eye. Rick?
So, Lucas, what's the timeline here? When did the secretary learn that the president was going to force him out early?
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo called Mattis early Sunday morning to say that President Trump was forcing him out 2 months early, robbing Mattis of the chance to travel to NATO ministerial meetings in Brussels and to testify in front of Congress. Officials say the president was annoyed by Mattis's resignation letter and said that he didn't want to give Mattis the opportunity to speak publicly. Former CIA Director and Defense Secretary Leon Panetta says leaving Syria before ISIS is defeated is a mistake.
We've made good progress, no question about it. We've made tremendous gains. But this is not a time when you're dealing with terrorist groups who can reorganize and threaten the security of our country. This is not a time to back away from that responsibility.
While the U.S. is pulling its forces out of Syria, in neighboring Iraq, more than 5,000 troops will remain on the ground, and officials say they could launch strike missions into Syria if called upon. Rick?
We'll have more on that later this hour. Lucas Tomlinson at the Pentagon. Lucas, thank you.
And another Fox News alert, day 3 of the partial government shutdown. After meeting over the weekend, the Senate was adjourned until Thursday. Majority Leader Mitch McConnell urging some level of compromise.
The president, from whom we will need a signature, and Senate Democrats, from whom we will need votes, reach an agreement. No procedural votes, no test votes, just a meaningful vote on a bipartisan agreement whenever that is reached. And it's my hope that it's reached sooner rather than later.
Our Ellison Barber is at the White House tracking all of this. And Ellison, is the White House still saying they must have that $5 billion for border security or no deal?
Well, they've come down from that number a little bit. We've repeatedly heard the White House say, they've been saying it all weekend, that they need $5 billion for border security and some sort of physical barrier. A senior administration official briefed reporters on Saturday and said that that was what they expected from Congress. But of course, things move pretty fast around here. And with 24 hours of that official briefing, reporters, Vice President Mike Pence and Budget Director Mick Mulvaney were on their way to Capitol Hill to meet with Democratic Senator Chuck Schumer and give him a counter offer. The White House says that offer is somewhere between $1.3 billion and $5 billion.
The ball is in the Senate's court. Of course, keep in mind, any bill that comes out of the Senate on this topic will have to have 60 votes, so they'll have to have Democrat support. They are at 1.3 yesterday. We were at $5 billion a couple of days ago. We moved off of the 5. We hope they move up from their 1.3.
A Democratic source tells Fox News the latest offer from the White House is $2.1 billion for border security, and that includes new fencing plus $400 million for other immigration priorities. Mulvaney says it is possible that this shutdown will go into the new year. Anita?
Okay, and when the White House says they want a physical barrier, we've seen the president tweet out photos of sort of something with slats. Is that more amenable to the Democrats? Do you think they might go for something like that?
Yeah, well, we've heard back and forth this idea that really everything is a game of semantics when it comes to this particular fight, that the White House, the president says he needs a wall, that Democrats don't want a wall, but now the White House says it's really more so a steel slat barrier. They're calling it a fence, a physical barrier. The president tweeted this photo last week, and the White House describes it as a steel slatted fence. They say this is what they want to build, and that they have told the Democrats this is exactly what they want to build. The White House claims that Democrats have supported this sort of thing in the past with the Secure Fence Act, that at best they are playing a game of semantics and saying they won't agree to a wall, but don't consider the steel slats to be a, quote, wall at worst. The White House says this is all about politics for Democrats. The president tweeting this morning, quote, virtually every Democrat we are dealing with today strongly supported a border wall or fence. It was only when I made it an important part of my campaign because people and drugs were pouring into our country unchecked that they turned against it. Desperately needed. Democrats, of course, say this is all about politics for the president and that he is throwing a temper tantrum and playing politics at the taxpayers' expense. Anita?
Okay, and the Senate coming back to talk again on Thursday, and so we'll be following this. Ellison, thank you so much.
You bet.
With both sides digging in their heels, Democratic leaders Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi say President Trump has gotten what he wanted, pointing to this exchange they had with the president in the Oval Office 2 weeks ago.
You shut it down.
No.
And then you opened
20
it up
times.
very quickly. And
20 times.
I don't want to do what you did.
20 times
Chuck,
you have called for, I will shut down the government if I don't get my wool. None of us have said.
You want to know something?
You've said
okay,
it.
you want to put that on my...
You've said it.
I'll take it.
Okay, good.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And I am proud, and I'll tell you what, I am proud to shut down the government for border security.
Since then, the president has changed his tune, tweeting the Democrats now own the shutdown. So who pays the political price for this down the line? Let's bring in someone who knows. Karl Rove, former White House Deputy Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush and a Fox News contributor. Karl, Merry Christmas.
Rick, Merry Christmas to you, and I want you to, after we finish talking, get back to that job of getting the market to turn around.
Yeah, we're going to make that happen during this program, and now we're down 435.
Exactly.
The president, as we heard, said he would take full responsibility for the shutdown, and now he's blaming the Democrats. Who wins?
Well, everybody loses, but I think the president loses more than others. Last week there was a poll by Suffolk for USA Today. About, I think, 43% said the blame for the shutdown would fall on the president. 30% said it would fall on both parties, and 20-some-odd% said it would fall on the Democrats. So everybody's going to walk away from this tarnished. Washington's going to look more dysfunctional. Washington's going to look like it can't get its act together. But the president is going to end up, I think, being blamed more, in part because, as we saw in that exchange in the Oval Office, he said, I own it. I'll be proud to do it.
He did. Karl, we've seen fences work. We've seen border walls work.
Yeah.
In fact, right here, out west near San Diego, they improved the wall there, and the illegal crossings went down like 90%. And we know that some Democrats supported building a wall in the past. And it seems that they oppose it now because the president's pushing for it.
Yeah, look, it's politics. Let's be honest about it. Senator Schumer, Senator Barack Obama, Senator Hillary Clinton, Senator Dianne Feinstein were among the 80 members of the U.S. Senate that supported President George W. Bush's Secure Fencing Wall Act in 2005, which authorized the construction of 700 miles of wall. Now, there was a recognition you didn't need a wall everywhere. Santa Elena Canyon in West Texas, 150 miles long. The U.S. border's about 1,100, 1,200 feet up in the air, straight up a cliff. You don't need a wall there, but there are places where it makes good sense. The United States has built about 650 miles of wall. Chuck Schumer supported it when it was offered in 2005. He could easily justify this by saying, yes, we're willing to give the president X dollars to finish the 700 miles of wall that's already been authorized and to repair the fencing in the wall that's already been built and is now, after a decade, in need of repair.
Well, so much of politics is negotiation, and it doesn't look like these two sides have the ability to negotiate. They have to, though.
Well, Democrats don't really want to negotiate, Rick. They want to run the clock out. If Congress if we don't arrive at a solution to this by January 3rd, The Democrat majority will replace the Republican majority, and the leverage that the Republicans had by passing a unified bill through the House, getting it to the Senate, will have erased, and Democrats will have an even stronger hand in stopping the wall. But you'll notice the Democrats understand the wall itself is not that popular. Polls roughly in the high 30s. But border security is very important. You'll notice that every time a Democrat says, I'm against the wall, they say, I'm for border security, because that, the pollsters have told them, tests really well, with a large majority of Americans saying, yeah, we need to secure the border, and we need to increase the border security that we have, particularly on our southern border.
Semantics. So you have had the president's ear before, maybe not this one. Maybe you do have his ear, I don't know, but he often watches. So what's your advice to President Trump?
Well, I'm not certain I have good advice, because, look, he's been reasonable about this by saying, look, I've said 5, but I'm willing to settle for less. You offered 1.6. I wanted 5. Can't we settle someplace in the middle? But again, the Democrats have no incentive whatsoever to negotiate a deal before the end of the year. They want to have him suffer a political wound. They want to strengthen their hand as the Democrats come into control of the U.S. House. They want to say to their base, we're going to take him on for the next 2 years, and look how we started off with a political win. I wished he had not done the televised meeting from the Oval Office. Never good to see how sausage is made. And the legislative sausage making of this deal, once exposed, locked people into a position. And Chuck Schumer, as we saw the other day on the House, on the floor of the Senate, is locked into the idea of the only way you're going to get this, Mr. President, is to give up, to abandon the wall. And the president has a moral obligation not to. And Chuck Schumer should know that. He voted to authorize 700 miles of it. If he thought it was such a bad idea back then, why did he vote for it?
Karl Rove, we appreciate your insight. Unfortunately, now I'm thinking about sausage being made, but, you know, Merry Christmas to everyone.
I'll send you some nice venison sausage if you like there,
that's
Rick.
on the record.
A belated Christmas gift.
I appreciate
All
that.
right,
Thank
excellent.
Hungry.
You bet.
Okay, a Fox News alert, nearly 400 people killed and more than 1,400 injured when a tsunami hit Indonesia Saturday without warning. Officials warning more deadly waves could strike in the coming days as a volcano that triggered the tsunami continues to erupt. Our William LaJeunesse is live in Los Angeles with the latest. William, good to see you. What more can you tell us?
Well, let's take a look at some aerials from the volcano that caused the tsunami. We hit
the Pentagon as well, as he keeps his promise to bring U.S. troops home from Syria.
Plus, the political standoff over the government shutdown.
We need the Democrats to give us their votes. Call it a Democrat shutdown, call it whatever you want. Let's get out, let's work together, let's be bipartisan, and let's get it done. The shutdown hopefully will not last long.
Back 18 minutes after the hour now, a Florida dad serving in the Air Force surprising his 3 children with an early Christmas present. The kids overjoyed to see their father, Lieutenant Colonel Alfredo LeBoy, after a 1-year deployment. They didn't think he would come home until the end of January.
I thought I was going to spend Christmas without him, and it didn't feel the same spending Christmas with my dad, and then to see him, and I'm like, oh, I feel so happy.
This one would be every year combined. This one's better.
Better than any present?
This is better than all your guys' gifts. This is the best gift ever.
To have him here, to have him like in my arms again, it's amazing.
Aw, Dad will be home for 10 days. His family says they now have everything they want for Christmas. Rick?
That was awesome as advertised. President Trump sent Secretary of Defense Jim Mattis packing sooner than expected, naming his deputy, Patrick Shanahan, to run the Pentagon while the president seeks a permanent replacement. The sudden change at the top sparking strong reaction on the Sunday talk shows.
I think the relationship between these two men had been fraying. I think the president no longer relied on Mattis to be able to deliver the president's vision.
I was one of many senators who privately sat down with General Mattis and said, please stay as long as you possibly can. We desperately need your mature voice, your patriotism in the room when this president's making life or death decisions about national security. But it obviously reached a breaking point.
I'm devastated by this, and I think that what Mattis did was very important for our country. This one matters to our country. It matters to our foreign interest. This matters to our citizens.
Joining us now, David Mark, news editor of the Washington Examiner. Merry Christmas to you, sir. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks for being here.
We're hearing some very strong language, a lot of very strong reaction to Secretary Mattis leaving.
Absolutely. Secretary Mattis has become a rather divisive figure, at least in the Trump administration. He was seen during the first 2 years or so of the Trump tenure in office by some as an adult in the room, somebody to keep, in the view of critics at least, the president away from his worst impulses. Now, though, he's on his way out, and the administration is not really bidding him a really fond farewell.
But the president has also, it's been noted, kept his promise. He said he was going to move the troops out of Syria, and now he's doing it.
Well, that's right. This should be no surprise to anybody who watched the 2016 presidential election. You might agree with that kind of move, you might disagree with it, but it is essentially along the lines of what Trump said he was going to do, not just in the Middle East, but I think we should watch for elsewhere in the world, in Asia and other parts of the globe.
Are we in good hands with the Deputy Defense Secretary taking the reins?
Mr. Shanahan is basically a technocrat. He is the deputy, somebody who makes the logistics run. He has a background in the private sector. He was an executive at Boeing for a number of years, working on airliners. He's got advanced engineering degrees from MIT. So he's got the technical background, probably not somebody who would stay on in a full-time capacity, but he certainly knows how to run the department, at least in the short term.
Okay, so he'll be there for now?
Well, yes, and what comes next is an open question. The president has not said who might succeed him, and also what the confirmation hearings might be like. It could get touchy.
Critics have said that we're doing Russia and Iran a favor by leaving Syria and leaving this in the hands of Turkey, basically, to go in there and do the rest of the mop-up. Are we doing Iran and Russia a favor?
There's a lot of reasons to think so in many ways. Iran has wanted influence in Syria. They've got a lot of troops there, depending on what you define them as. Turkey has its own reasons. They're likely to come down hard on the Kurds in northern Syria. It could be awfully ugly. At the same time, there's a lot of arguments for pulling out troops, because what are they doing there in the end? Is it directly in American interest? It's a long-running debate, and it's something that's not clearly along left and right, liberal and conservative. You get some on both sides arguing different things.
The president yesterday said the withdrawal of U.S. troops from Syria will be slow and highly coordinated. We also know that we still have troops in Iraq, and they can and will carry out raids across the border, and we're still going to carry out airstrikes on Syria if necessary and when necessary. So it's not like we're just leaving and that's it.
Well, right, and there's still, of course, air bases in Turkey and other parts of that region, not to mention probably intelligence assets that are left behind that don't get discussed as much. So, yes, it's not like a complete pullout. The one thing is, though, it caught allies by surprise. Great Britain, many others in the region, Israel, et cetera, they did not know this was coming, and I think that's what's causing a lot of the concern.
Well, it also seems that maybe Secretary Mattis didn't know it was coming, and members of the president's administration didn't know it was coming, but the president does what the president wants to do.
Right, and General Mattis had made arguments against this apparently in private. He was overridden. That's the president's prerogative. He's the commander-in-chief. He gets to make those decisions, but General Mattis apparently thought it was a bridge too far, and he had to go after that.
We spoke during the break about what a wild couple of years it's been in Washington, where you're based.
Yes.
And you think it's going to get even crazier in the next year or two.
Well, right. Now, we have several top cabinet officials that are still acting. We were just discussing the defense secretary. The attorney general is still outstanding. You have some others where the top people have not been confirmed. Then, of course, we have the stock market tanking. We have all these other international crises. And, of course, Democrats are set to take the majority in the House of Representatives in a couple weeks or so, less than that. They will have subpoena power over the administration. They can make things pretty uncomfortable for Team Trump.
The president promised he'd turn things on its ear, and he has.
Well, in that way, he's kept his promise. Maybe you like it, maybe you don't, but he has followed through.
David Mark from the Washington Examiner, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anita.
And the partial government shutdown hinging on the battle over border security. The big question, how long will it go on? Our panel weighs in.
Plus, the border wall standoff spilling over to Twitter as Senator Bob Corker reignites his Twitter feud with President Trump.
This is a made-up fight. so the president can look like he's fighting. But even if he wins, our borders are going to be insecure.
Fox News alert for you now, and we're keeping an eye on the Dow, which is taking quite a tumble this morning. Right now, it's down more than 300 points, which follows last week, which was the worst week of trading we have seen since 2008. Not pretty. Today,
now I'm going to get my tissue.
Now get your tissues.
Now I'm really sad.
I think you're going to need another one.
But the silver lining is,
yeah,
it was down over 400 points a little while ago, so maybe we're on the way back.
You know, we can only hope for a rally.
Yeah. Let's go. Let's go, people. Well, maybe you heard about this ongoing feud boiling over as President Trump and Senator Bob Corker trade shots over border security.
This is a purposely contrived fight over, at the end of the day, even no matter who wins, our borders are still going to be insecure. This is a made-up fight, so the president can look like he's fighting. But even if he wins, our borders are going to be insecure.
And just moments ago, President Trump tweeted this. For all of the sympathizers out there of Brett McGurk, remember, he was the Obama appointee who was responsible for loading up airplanes with $1.8 billion in cash and sending it to Iran as part of the horrific Iran nuclear deal, now terminated, approved by, quote, little Bob Corker. Rich Edson is live in Washington. This fight doesn't seem to be ending anytime soon.
Yeah, no, it doesn't, Rick. It's a common venue for these exchanges as well, Twitter. The president responded to Senator Corker's comments earlier, writing, quote, Senator Corker just stated that I'm so privileged to serve in the Senate for 12 years, and that's what I told the people of our state. That's what I do, serve for 2 terms. But that is not true. Wanted to run, but poll numbers tanked when I wouldn't endorse him. Bob Corker was responsible for giving us the horrible Iran nuclear deal, which I ended, yet he badmouths me for wanting to bring our young people safely back home. Bob wanted to run and asked me for my endorsement. I said no, and the game was over. Hashtag MAGA, I love Tennessee. Corker then responded to the president, yes, just like Mexico is paying for the wall. Hashtag alert the daycare staff. Corker is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He opposed the Iran nuclear deal when the Obama administration finalized it in 2015. Corker is retiring at the end of this year, Rick.
I just Googled how tall is Bob Corker, and according to Google, he's 5'7".
Okay.
So, but these two have locked horns before, haven't they?
Yeah, and along these same lines also. In October of 2017, Corker called the White House an adult daycare center, adding that someone had missed their shift after the president tweeted similar criticism of Corker. The president attacked Corker after the Tennessee Republican claimed then Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, Defense Secretary James Mattis, and White House Chief of Staff John Kelly were separating our country from chaos. All 3 have left or are leaving the administration, Rick.
No dull days in Washington, Rich Edson.
Sir.
Thank you very much.
Meanwhile, day 3 of the partial government shutdown, and still no deal in sight as the White House and Democrats reach a stalemate over border security funding. So with so much uncertainty on the Hill, incoming acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney says don't expect this shutdown to end anytime soon.
I don't think things are going to move very quickly here for the next couple of days. I think that is, it's very possible that this shutdown will go beyond the 28th and into the new Congress.
Okay, let's bring in our panel now. John Summers, former communications director for Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, and Boyd Matheson, former chief of staff for Senator Mike Lee and opinion editor for the Deseret News. John, well, first of all, welcome to you both, and thank you for joining us on this Christmas Eve.
Merry Christmas. Thanks for having me.
Merry Christmas. John, let me start with you. You and I go back a little ways here. You might remember I was hounding your phone and blowing up your email back in 2010 during those midterms, trying to convince you to get Harry Reid to sit down with us, and you made that happen. So in that sense, he sort of was willing to make a compromise, reach a different audience. Is that what's missing here right now? We need some compromise?
I think you hit the nail on the head there. I mean, and Harry Reid is a classic example of a master deal maker in Washington, and we're seeing fewer and fewer of those types of folks here in D.C. And the problem is what we're seeing now is that this is all about Donald Trump. This isn't about him doing what's best for the country. He actually made the decision to do its best for the country by trying to avoid a government shutdown. And then he blinked because he started getting tremendous criticism from some of the most extreme voices in his party. And then that's when he decided to back down. You know, as we've seen already, and as Trump even this morning conceded, Democrats are actually for strong border security. We've actually provided funding, you know, for physical barriers as well as drones and other things. So not for open borders the way he and the Republicans like to try to say. And so, you know, it is just a matter of compromise. And if we can get him to the table and actually start working with us, I think we can get there.
Okay, Boyd, let me bring you in on this. Does it seem like maybe the president has already compromised in terms of what he wants? We started out with a concrete wall. That's what he wanted. And now we're seeing pictures of fences with slats. Is that a compromise?
I think there's plenty of room for compromise out there, and a lot of this is just semantics. A lot of it is just, you know, what has been the latest, you know, pollster-approved, consultant-certified language for both the left and the right. As John rightly pointed out, the Democrats have voted for up to $8 billion for fences and border security. I think there's clearly space in there. This is one of those classic Washington, D.C. fake fights followed by a false choice, and it's all there because Congress continues to not do their job through regular order. We keep doing these continuing resolutions, which we've done for over a decade now, instead of actually passing. So we always end up with a fiscal cliff or some big shutdown fight, and that's not doing the work of the American people. I think they should all be back in Washington, D.C. They can get this thing done in an afternoon if they're willing to engage. But right now, all we have is a lot of shoulder shrugging going on, pointing fingers, placing blame. We always talk about we stand on the shoulders of giants in this country. We stand on their shoulders because they were willing to square them. And Democrats and Republicans and the president need to square up and deal with this issue, and let's move the country forward.
Okay, John, you used to advise former Senator Harry Reid on some very big issues where there was a need for compromise. What would you advise the Senate leaders now?
To do exactly what Boyd just said, because he's exactly right. We can't manage a country by moving from crisis to crisis to crisis, and that's what we do as it relates to funding the government. So he's absolutely right. They should be here in Washington, and they should be working this stuff out. They shouldn't be on vacation right now, because here's what happens during a government shutdown. As we saw in 2013 when the government shut down for a few days over Obamacare, $24 billion was lost in our economy. We have about 1 million people who are either not working or who are working and not getting paid, including folks in the military and Border Patrol. Imagine how that feels to be separated from your family and not being paid for your work all at the same time. So they have a responsibility to get together, to get in a room and iron this thing out.
Well, they're on a 24-hour notice. They're ready to receive 24-hour notice to come back to Washington if they have something to talk about. But Boyd, realistically, how long is this going to take before someone's willing to step forward and make a compromise?
Yeah, sadly, I think it's going to take a few more days just for that very reason. They're going to continue to look to the pollsters. They're going to look at how this plays out. And it's going to be a political decision rather than a good policy decision for the people of the country. And that's the problem. I think John and I could probably get this thing worked out in an hour. This is not that complicated. Those of us out here in the West, we know how to get it done. But I do hope that the president will come to the table. I hope that Mitch McConnell calls the Senate back into session quickly. I hope Nancy Pelosi is ready to step forward and do her part in this. And let's get it done. This is not that complicated. And we can show that compassion and rule of law as it relates to our border, those are compatible principles. We can get this thing done.
Well, if everyone could agree like you gentlemen are agreeing this morning, and you're from different sides of the aisle, we really maybe could get something done. Thank you so much for both of you for joining us this morning, and we'll certainly be watching this one. Rick.
Thanks, Anita. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Hunger is on the rise. For the first time, the United Nations World Food Program is facing 6 food emergencies simultaneously, largely due to armed conflicts around the world. Amy Kellogg is live in Milan, Italy. Amy, scant resources for a lot of needs. So where is the most urgent case?
Yeah, Rick, you know, this is the time of year when we tend to take stock of the year that was. And unfortunately, as you mentioned, 2018 found the World Food Program dealing with more food emergencies than it is used to. Hunger was actually on the decline globally for for much of the past century. In the past year or so, it's gone up, and Yemen, Rick, is really the most urgent, critical case that the World Food Program is dealing with. Half the population there is food insecure. In other words, doesn't have enough to eat. Estimates are 85,000 children so far have died of starvation during the conflict there. World Food Program's David Beasley recounts a recent visit to a hospital in Yemen.
When I see a little child, little feet were sticking out the blanket, and I went to tickle the little feet, thinking I'd get a little smile. It was like tickling a ghost. Children are dying. Every 10 to 11 minutes, a child dies. A preventable death. This is a man-made conflict. It needs a man-made solution.
Now, Rick, on a somewhat positive note, just over the weekend, a UN advance team went into the crucial port city of Hodeidah in Yemen, critical to keep that ceasefire that's recently been declared intact so that food and aid supplies can get in, Rick.
So where are some of these other problem spots, and are there any surprises on the list?
Yeah, well, Burma has had an issue with the Rohingya Muslims who've been fleeing in the tens of thousands in the last year or so. Many are saying that they are fleeing actually ethnic cleansing, and they are hunkered down in very crowded and uncomfortable camps in Bangladesh. And then there's northeast Nigeria, which is interesting because it's a country that's awash in oil, but it's suffering from conflict. Boko Haram is best known for kidnapping and brazen terrorist attacks, but it's also causing acute hunger. People have been forced off land and now depend on handouts. And then there's the post-conflict trouble. For example, Raqqa was liberated from Islamic State in Syria to much fanfare, but what is left? What are people going back to? How will they source clean water? How will they get food? That is a challenge for people working in the field in 2019. Now, the World Food Program, Rick, was founded by Americans. It was an American idea. It happens to be based here in Italy, and Americans are the biggest funders to the World Food Program. So as they look to 2019, they are grateful for all the help that they get, but concerned that the aid will keep coming because these crises keep coming. And as I said, hunger was on the decline. It's now on the increase, and it's caused not by natural disasters largely, but by conflict, Rick.
Yeah, troubling images and a troubling story. Amy Kellogg, thank you from Milan.
President Trump's decision to withdraw from Syria getting criticism on both sides of the aisle, but at least one prominent Republican is offering his support.
Does anybody remember
the Trump
Vietnam? They waited us out, and the Taliban are going to wait us out. They know we will eventually leave, and leave we must. I mean, I don't think we have enough money to be paying to build and rebuild and build and rebuild Afghanistan. The president's right, and I think the people agree with him. Let's rebuild America. Let's spend that money here at home.
So where does the Syria strategy go from here? Retired four-star General Jack Keane joins us next.
And the Grinch getting some competition. Why police have Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer on the run.
Run, run, Rudolph, Randolph ain't too far behind. Run, run, Rudolph, Santa's gotta make it to town.
The seasonal disguise. Best video of the day here, folks. A burglar dressed as Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer caught on security video stealing from a business in college. That's Rudolph taking that box off the shelf.
Goodness.
The crook, I'm told, briefly removed her disguise. I don't know if we're going to see it, but the brief removal of the mask showed her face, and police are asking for help to identify Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer so Santa can put this thief on the naughty list. We're not going to see it.
Okay, well, President Trump feeling the heat over his controversial decision last week to pull all 2,000 American troops out of Syria and draw down about half of our fighting force in Afghanistan. Many Republicans have slammed the move, but the president has at least one supporter, Rand Paul, the Kentucky senator, praising the decision, comparing the nearly two-decade mission in the Middle East to the hugely unpopular Vietnam War.
The president's right, and I think the people agree with him. Let's rebuild America. Let's spend that money here at home. We've been there 17 years. We've been in the Middle East most of that time. It's not precipitous. The president promised when we went into Syria, our goal was to wipe out ISIS. We took 99% of the land. They're on the run. Do we have to do everything? We defeated ISIS. But now you have the hawks in the administration and throughout Congress saying, oh, now we have to wait till Russia and Iran leave Syria. Well, that was never our goal, and it's never going to happen.
And joining us now is Fox News senior strategic analyst, General Jack Keane. General, Merry Christmas to you. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, Merry Christmas to you too, Anita.
So that was a supporter of the president's decision, but he certainly has a lot of critics out there. Let's hear from one of them right now. Senator Chris Coons has been very critical on this. Let's hear what he has to say.
I think by abruptly withdrawing from Syria, President Trump is handing a great big Christmas gift to Vladimir Putin of Russia and to the Ayatollah Khamenei of Iran. And it's a pretty clear guidepost for me when there is a foreign policy decision that's cheered by Vladimir Putin and Rand Paul. That's a pretty good sign. It's a terrible idea.
Wow, some tough words there from Senator Coons. And it seems like the president finds himself in a little bit of a strange position here, being criticized for possibly not being tough enough on ISIS now. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I've spoken publicly on this a number of times. I mean, I totally disagree with the decision, but I do think there's an opportunity because of new developments to possibly modify the decision. And that is that the Saudis are coming forward now with the full-throated money to do the reconstruction effort in northeastern Syria that we had promised the people as a result of the conflict to destroy ISIS in the vicinity of the town of Raqqa and the environment around it. Literally all the schools are destroyed, most of the infrastructure, there's no electricity, the water treatment plants aren't working. So we had a plan to rebuild that, and what the president, I think rightfully so, wanted somebody else to pay for it besides the United States. The Saudis are now wanting to do that in full, and I think given that reality, I think we should possibly modify the decision to pull all our troops out in the near term and use this opportunity to help stabilize and secure that area so the reconstruction effort can go forward and be completed. And that ISIS does not interfere with it. ISIS clearly does not want the people in that area being indebted to Sunni Arabs or to the United States at all. And they've been telling us, I know this from the Institute of Study of War, has been reporting for weeks, that ISIS has been telling the people in the area, see, the United States told you they were going to take care of you, and they haven't done it. And you can imagine what they're saying now, being the fact we're going to be pulling out of this. So I do think there's a new opportunity here to get that effort done. After all, we did participate in that conflict, you know, for the better part of a year.
Right. And General Keane, do you think the president will listen to that advice, advice from you and from others to modify his plan and perhaps leave some troops there?
I don't know. I mean, the advice certainly is not going to come from me. It's going to come from his National Security Advisor, John Bolton, and Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo. I think President Trump has always surrounded himself with a very good national security team, and he still has that, and I'm sure he'll find a very capable replacement for General Mattis. But yes, that'll come as a result of that advice. I do think one of the things that happened to the president here, and a little bit of an injustice to him, I call it a process foul, because we had a major decision here, but there was no meeting of the entire interagency to vet that decision. And what I mean by that is the National Security Council, Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the CIA Director, Secretary of Treasury, National Security Advisor, writ large, coming together, make a decision. Here's the risk associated with the decision. Here's the operational impact of the decision. Here's what it means to our allies, how we're going to inform them, and what's the political liability of the decision